talk, I'd like to welcome Gemma Foster, who works for the National Deaf Children's Society, and she's going to talk to us about supporting children with hearing impairment. So hello Gemma, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself?
Hi, my name's Gemma, Gemma Foster. I've been work for the National Deaf Children's Society. I've been working with them as an advice and guidance officer for about 11 years now. Prior to that, I worked as a deafblind specialist with SENS and the local authority. I've got a background in deaf studies with education, that was my degree, and I've done a deafblind studies diploma as well, so I've worked with deafblind people. I've also worked as a communication support worker with deaf students in a college and an employment coordinator with visually impaired people. And prior to all of that, I worked with deaf adults with additional needs as a rehab officer. So I've got quite a lot of experience, about 20 years working within the field of sensory impairment, but specifically around deafness and hearing impairment. Also, I'm an adoptive mum. So I've got a little girl who's 6 years old, who's got some extra needs. So I'm really aware of how exhausting it is having a child with additional needs at home during lockdown, in COVID, whilst trying to work full time as well. So yeah,
I'm sure lots of people listening will identify with that right now. So how can then we help children with hearing loss learn in these challenging days?
Well, as we all know, it's so challenging at the moment, isn't it? We're in lockdown 3. It's looking like the earliest that some schools will go back is after half term, but there's more and more talk about going on towards Easter. We're all learning, everything's changing every day. But the most important thing at the moment is making sure that our deaf or hearing impaired children can access their education, be that online, through Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google or whatever platform we're using, just making sure that the lessons and the information that we're giving to deaf or hearing impaired children is accessible as possible for all our children. And the government have stated, as we know, that children are to receive between 3 and 5 hours of teaching and or resources every day, depending on their age. But the government have also been really clear that the teaching should be accessible for all children.
Yeah, and you were saying that isn't it? It means that adaptation as well, isn't it, for your students? And I suppose knowing your students' needs has never been as important when you can't see them in front of you. How can teachers then support the deaf students in the lessons? How can they make them accessible?
Okay, so at the National Deaf Children's Society, we've got our education specialists have written some really good resources that are aimed at teachers, and again some really good resources aimed at parents, and we'll put this information, there'll be a link to the website and the resources that we've got, and they'll go into what I'm going to talk about in a lot more detail than I can in just sort of a short period of time. But hopefully I'll give you some ideas as to how you can adapt your sessions to make them more accessible. Obviously, it's going to depend on the age of the children that you're teaching and the level of deafness. So a child who's wearing a hearing aid with moderate hearing loss and has access to a radio aid normally in class might normally manage fine, not really have any extra help. That's going to be very different to a child or a young person who's maybe 16, using sign language, has a communication support worker with them and relies on BSL as their main form of communication. So it's going to depend on the age of the children that you're teaching, and also the communication methods and the type and level of deafness that the child's got. But a few things that might help. So I think just remembering that doing live teaching online doesn't necessarily have to always be live. One of the biggest issues that we've heard from deaf children and young people is that hearing their teacher online is one of the most difficult things for them. Often as teachers, you're quite new to this, we're quite new to teaching online, and doing online sessions like this is completely new to me, and remembering to slow down and to speak clearly. And for deaf children or children with hearing difficulties, hearing what's being said by the teachers in the classroom when they're delivering their sessions live can be really difficult. Also, you're not as confident as teachers maybe with the technology and things, and that all comes across when deaf or hearing impaired children are trying to lip read you. just simple things like making sure, being aware of where you're standing when you're teaching. So making sure that there's nothing busy going on in the background that can be quite distracting. Making sure that you're not standing in front of a window so that your body becomes a silhouette. You know, making sure that you've got good light on your face, that you're speaking clearly. Maybe that you're using some gestures, or if you're writing things on the board, to make sure that if you're writing something on the board, to make sure that you pause and give the deaf child some time to look at what's been written and then come back and carry on. Using objects, using references, making it as visual as possible. All these things are going to help. Also, things like using breakout groups. If you're able to use like the breakout groups in Zoom, for example, a child with a hearing loss is going to manage much better in a small group of people and try and contribute much more clearly and confidently in a small group of people compared to a big group of, say, 30 children in a class. So it's going to be, it makes it that bit more interactive, but also that a bit more accessible. Thinking again about things like videos. A lot of deaf children or hearing impaired children will rely on having subtitles for videos. So if you're using videos as part of the teaching or as part of the resources that you're putting on there, making sure that the videos have got subtitles. And increasingly it's often available, but maybe we don't know how to look for it. So often subtitles are known as closed captions. So if you're on YouTube or something like that, there's a little button that's usually got a CC symbol on it, and that's closed captions. If you click on that, it brings up the captions. So making sure that you're aware of whether the video has got captions, but also making sure that your student knows how to access the captions if that's what's needed. Also, if you're using some of the like the BBC bite-size resources, they're all subtitled, which is great. And also the Oak National Academy, they've got a lot of resources, as we know, online, and many of their sessions, they all have the subtitles, but many of them have BSL interpreting on as well. So it can be really useful to have a look and see what resources they've got, so that you can share those resources. If the child or the young person that you're working with is lip reading is almost impossible when you're watching a video or something that's like a 2D screen. So just bear that in mind, that videos can be really difficult. So making sure we've got subtitles, really important. If the child or young person that you're working with usually uses sign language to communicate, and maybe they've got somebody in class supporting them, and that's through an EHCP, an education health plan, or one of the other similar systems that's in the devolved nations, like a support plan or whatever, this should continue to be provided. So if a child needs BSL support to access their lessons in person, then they're also going to need that support when you're delivering live sessions or when you're doing resources and things. So make sure things like Zoom and using interpreters, are really used to using Zoom to do interpreting now, and all the other platforms as well. So yeah, if you're delivering teaching, making sure that there's a way that the deaf child or the hearing impaired child, if they use BSL to communicate, that they're getting access to that when you're delivering your sessions. Just going back to like the subtitles and thinking about speech to text, that's increasingly popular and available and really useful at the moment. So when we're doing a lot of learning online, deaf children are able to access like almost like a transcript of what's been said. So things like the Google Hangouts and Google Meet, and Microsoft Teams, I know, all have automatic subtitles or automatic captions. Deaf young people have told us that there's varying degrees of accuracy with it. Obviously it's automated, so sometimes it's better than others. But again, just researching that and looking into that. So if you're delivering a teaching session, getting the information and making sure that the captions are available. There's also another program / app called Otter.ai, and I believe it's an American system, but it works really well with Zoom, and it's the most accurate and reliable that we've found as an organisation, and we use that in conjunction with Zoom, and it translates everything that's being said by the different people on Zoom or on the platform into text. So a deaf or hearing impaired person, if they're struggling to follow what's being said or struggling to lip read, they can have a look on the transcript. And what a lot of the deaf professionals that we work with at NDCS, they'll have it open on 2 screens. So they'll maybe have the Zoom or the live chat thing or whatever open on one screen, and then on another screen have the transcript, so they can flip between the 2 different, so they can either read it or watch and try and lip read. Otter is a paid for resource. I think you pay for it in dollars, I believe, and I believe it's around about £20 a month. So obviously you'd have to look into that, but that's the most reliable that we found. Also think about maybe providing your teaching notes and again, it depends on the age of the child, but think about maybe providing teaching notes in advance. If a deaf student, maybe in secondary school, who's got a hearing loss and is trying to rely on using the hearing aids and maybe a radio aid, which we can talk about later, if they've got a plan of your teaching notes and they know where you're going with things and they can follow that, then that's going to make it much easier for them to follow an online lesson compared to trying to just follow it and work out where they're going. If they can see the structure and the plan, it also means that they maybe won't need to make so many notes. Obviously, if you think about trying to make a note, well, when you're looking down, and we're all hearing it, so we can carry on listening, but a child with a hearing loss can't do that. They have to look up to look at you, to listen, to then look down again. So if there's a way of providing those notes without the child having to take notes, that's going to increase their learning. And again, with the speech to text and the Otter, like I mentioned before, if you can do that, that gives you the notes and prevents the child from having to take notes, which is really helpful. Terminology and new vocabulary. So if you're moving on from one topic to another topic, think about the vocabulary that the child is going to need to learn before you go into that topic. So if you're going to start a new topic about ancient Egyptians, think about all the vocabulary that isn't everyday vocabulary that deaf or hearing impaired children hear. Deaf children miss a lot of information through not being able to do the incidental learning that we do. We all learn by hearing what's going on around us. Deaf children have to be taught all that vocabulary. So thinking about it in advance and letting the child and the parents or the young person, whoever's supporting, have the key vocabulary before they start that topic is going to really help them in the long run with the vocab. And it'll also mean that the children are familiar with that vocabulary before they start to learn about the vocabulary. So it's not everything new coming at them all at once. Yeah, and other than that, just keep things short and snappy, visual as possible. And yeah, just remember, lip reading is exhausting. I think we're all finding learning on computers and on screens really difficult. And as adults, we're finding it difficult. And as children and young people, they're finding it really difficult. And lip reading is exhausting. And especially when you're lip reading on a screen, it's much more difficult. With children or young people who use sign language to communicate, remembering about eye strain, it's very difficult to keep focused on somebody who's interpreting or signing for a long period of time. And adult professionals, deaf professionals that I work with find it really difficult. And so if we think about how children and young people are going to find that even more difficult. So yeah, hopefully there's a few tips there, but and hopefully that's useful.
Wow, I think there's amazing lots of information, but interestingly, I see so much crossover with some of the advice I give about autistic children, using those visuals, because they don't always, they find eye contact a strain, a lot of them. So watching and looking and noticing everything can be overwhelming. So, there's always a lot of crossover. So it just shows that good practice for any SEND learner is good for so many others as well. Interestingly, a couple of children that I know have come up with using the chat box in Zoom. So the teacher actually writes the question they want them to answer in the chat box so they can see it. And so on. And you might be happy to know that this video will have subtitles.
Brilliant.
All our videos on Studio TV have subtitles we've put into a package because it's really important to us to try and make our material accessible. And we have an accessibility button where people can change the size and colour of and font, I think, as well. So
Fantastic.
trying our best slowly.
Fantastic.
Okay. So we've talked about teachers, there's a lot they can do there. What about parents trying to, manage their children at home and get them engaged in that learning and, get on? It's hard, isn't it?
It really is. And it's great to have all these really good ideas as to how to do things, but when it comes down to it, it's so difficult. Being a parent and trying to manage and do your full-time job or any job, or just managing a house and managing children and trying to be a homeschool teacher as well. So just remember that I think the most important thing is to remember we're not alone in this, and that we're all struggling, and there are no perfect homeschool teachers, that we're all learning this together. But firstly, I'd say I think to just try and remember that this is a huge opportunity for us and for our children as well. As hard as it is, it's also a really good time where we can really give valuable input to our children's lives. We can really find out what our children are understanding, what they're missing, and things that we maybe wouldn't have realised, because in school things might not always get picked up because there's 30 children or whatever. I've certainly found that really helpful. I've found things that my daughter, teachers thought she was understanding, but actually when I've come to do the one-to-one work with her, I've discovered that she's not got some of the foundation blocks. So I think just to remember that although it's really difficult, it's a really valuable time as well to have that one-to-one support. There's not many other opportunities in life where we're going to be able to have that close support to be able to do that for our children. Okay, so one of the things we've got the opportunity to do is to adapt the content to what interests our children. We know what interests them. So in our house, we were doing numbers and counting along a number line. All of a sudden, it became Peter Rabbit hopping along a number line. We love Peter Rabbit in our house. And all of a sudden, we got her attention back because she wasn't bothered about jumping along a number line. But when Peter Rabbit hopped along a number line, we got it. So I think, just being able to use and base what we're doing with our children, bring it onto something that they're interested in. If it's Star Wars, if it's Peter Rabbit, if it's outer space, whatever it is that they're interested in, if we can key into that and adapt what we're having to teach them to focus it on something that they're interested in, it becomes much more meaningful. A class teacher can't do that for every child. So that's one thing. I think also trying to encourage our children to be independent as possible. And one of the things that we've talked about is having like 5 minutes at the start where we're about to start doing some work, and we just have 5 minutes and we think about what goals set some goals. What do we want to achieve? Plan it, prepare it, and then persevere. How long are we going to spend doing this activity? So the child knows that we're going to spend 10 minutes doing this. We've got the pencils, we've got the paper that we need, we've got the crayons, right, let's do this, and we're going to try, and we're not going to give up for 10 minutes or half an hour or 45 minutes or whatever it is, but trying to encourage the child or the learner to become as independent as possible. And there's lots of other things we can do to help with that independence. So I know with Lynn, we've talked before about having a workspace where we can just block out everything else. Deaf children or children with hearing impairment are so easily distracted visually. There's so much going on around them that if we can just kind of limit the space, and I think that this works with a lot of children, that we can just put maybe a cardboard box around an area or just something to say, right, this is our learning space, this is where we're working. You've got everything you need, you've got your pencils, you've got a rubber, you've got a sharpener, you've got your dictionary or whatever, everything's in one place, and just sit and focus for that period of time, however long it's been agreed for. So just, creating a workspace. Thinking about having a visual timetable as well. Again, I think it helps a lot of children, whatever additional needs they may have. And I think even children who don't have any additional needs really need this. And to just say, children love routine. And at the moment, there's not much in our lives other than not going out that is a routine. And especially when you're working from home and maybe there's other children in the home where you're trying to work with one child and then work with another child. And just having it set out so that it can be changed, but so the child knows, right, I'm going to be doing work now, and then it's TV time, and then we'll do some maths, and then it's dinner time. You know, whatever it is, just having it laid out so they can become as independent as possible. And then also, you know, like I said before, remembering we're not in it alone. Keep communication going with the school. You know, talk to the Senko, talk to your teacher of the deaf. Every child who's got hearing loss will have access to a teacher of the deaf. If you don't know who it is, contact the local authority and speak to the sensory team. If they've got a mild, moderate hearing loss, you may not even know that you've got access to a teacher of the deaf. But yeah, speak to them for advice, get information and advice from them, speak to the Senko, you know, make sure that you've got the support that's out there. If you've got parent support worker or a learning mentor in the school, see if there's any support that they can give you. And just remember, teachers are new to all of this as well. You know, we're all learning together. Just thinking about equipment, previously I mentioned about a radio aid, and many children with hearing loss will have access to a radio aid in school. Some schools and local authorities will allow you to bring the radio aid home from school at a weekend, for example. Some local authorities won't allow that. We're trying to encourage all local authorities at the moment. It's to do with insurance. They're very expensive pieces of equipment and there's insurance issues, but we're trying to encourage, if a child can't access their education in school without their radio aid, they're definitely not going to be accessing their education remotely without their radio aid. So really try and talk to the school or the local authority and see if that radio aid can be brought home. And if you don't know how to use it and your child maybe doesn't know how to use it because maybe they're too young, you know, get someone to explain it to you. It can make such a difference. If a child can access their radio aid and can plug it into their computer, they're going to get the sound directly into their ears from the computer. They're going to hear the teacher. It also helps to reduce the isolation that deaf children can feel. You know, they can connect it up with their iPad. They can go into when they're doing the groups on Zoom, or if they're playing games online or whatever. There's so many ways that it can reduce the isolation, and so you can use it for educational purposes, obviously, and first and foremost, but also it's around trying to reduce that isolation. And if it's about having a group of friends chatting on technology some way, and they can access that sound more clearly, that can only help children's mental health at the moment. So I think that's really, really important. And also for you, when you're teaching your child or you're trying to explain things, if you've got other children in the house, or you've maybe got a toddler running around making lots of noise and you're trying to get Johnny to concentrate on his maths, if Johnny can hear the child running around and be distracted by that sound and the aeroplane going overhead and the washing machine that's going on in the kitchen and everything else that's going on around them and all the background noise, if you can cut all of that out by using the radio aid and being able to speak to Johnny directly into his hearing aids, that or cochlear implants, that's obviously going to have a much better impact. So I think, you know, really, really look into whether or not you can have access to that radio aid at home. If you're struggling to access the computers or IT at home, remember the government have said and have committed to providing IT for children to access if they're struggling.
I'm sorry, did you see my little roll of my eyes then?
I did.
I know, I just want, you know, parents need to know that that is available. However, there has been some supply issues, haven't they? But to keep asking, sorry. Yes. I shouldn't have interrupted them, but you know,
no. I
know it's the same problem, but it is, the government have said it, so it should be available.
Should be available.
Sorry.
The other thing for deaf children is to remember that there's the Birkdale Trust that you could potentially apply to for funding for specifically for deaf children, and computers and IT is one of the
grants that they would give.
Grants that they give. Thank you, Lynn. Oh, where do we go back to on that then?
Just say that the Birkdale Trust.
Yep. So also for deaf children, don't forget about charities such as the Birkdale Trust, and there are other charities out there, but particularly for children with hearing loss, the Birkdale Trust is a fantastic organisation that give out grants for educational purposes, and Accessing IT is one of the grants that they will give out and have been known to give out. So yeah, so if your child's got a hearing loss, then check out the Birkdale Trust, and I'll put a link to that as well on the website.
Brilliant. Are there other professionals that need to kind of adapt the way they're working at the moment with children with hearing loss, such as maybe speech and language therapists?
Yeah, so obviously we're all having to adapt how we're working with children and young people at the moment, and the main professionals that work with children, deaf and hearing impaired children, are speech and language therapists and teachers of the deaf. And I have to say, I've had really good examples of both teachers of the deaf and speech and language therapists working really well with deaf children over Zoom or Skype or one of the other Teams, whatever. So yeah, if that isn't happening in your area, then you can really try and encourage that to happen. I know with speech and language particularly, some areas are really good at doing that, and particularly if you've got a specialist speech and language therapy team in your area around deafness, then they seem to be really particularly good. But yeah, if that's not happening, then see if you could encourage that. And again, if your child normally has access to support from a communication support worker in class, or maybe a teaching assistant in class, then make sure that that support's continuing. So I've heard some really good stories of children that are having live lessons, and they're having the sign languages there and available for them when they're doing the live lesson that's recorded in school. And then after the live lesson, the communication support worker contacts the child or the young person, and they have a session and they go through it using BSL and speech, and go through it and make sure that the child has understood everything, they've got the notes, they're clear on everything. Because whereas some of that clarification might have happened when you're doing the one-to-one in class, when you're doing it over Zoom or the medium, that clarification and that checking and that understanding that would normally go on can't happen when it's the live teaching. So therefore they put in an extra session after the main teaching session to check that understanding. But of course that needs planning in, and again, it's tiring for the child or the young person to have to they're listening to it and they're having more time on screens than their peers, so it needs planning really carefully. But I've seen that work really well for some deaf children.
It's getting the balance right, isn't it? That's right, to move their learning on, and maybe some things may be dropped for the sake of doing other things really well, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Do you know what? I'm going to ask the killer question right at the moment. What about face masks?
Face masks. Oh, face masks. Yeah, we all need to wear them. And causing increasing difficulties for deaf children, young people, adults. I think even adults who didn't realise that they did a lot of lip reading are now discovering that actually they do a lot of lip reading. So I think we just need to be aware of that. Obviously, if you're with a child or a young person who needs to lip read, and you need to remove your mask in a shop or in an environment, then you're able to do that, and you can get an exemption card that you can download. And as a parent or a teacher or a TA or somebody supporting somebody with a hearing loss, that's quite acceptable. And I would advise you to just download one of the exemption cards so that you've got it with you. And also, obviously, a lot of people know about the sunflower lanyard now that you can get as well. But masks in schools are increasingly common, particularly in secondary schools. Primary schools seem to be not wearing, teachers seem to not wear masks quite as much. But certainly in secondary schools, a lot more teachers, and obviously deaf children, young people and their peers are all wearing masks. So I think it's thinking about making adjustments and having reasonable adjustments. So you can get clear masks. They do tend to condensate quite a bit, and I know they're working on how to improve that. I believe if you get some spray from a well-known auction site that is for clearing motorcyclists' helmets to keep that clear. Apparently there's one that comes in a black bottle. Haven't tried it yet, but that's supposed to be quite good if you rub it on and then wipe it off. That's supposed to be quite good, and it stops the fogging up that comes with the masks. But also think about using a visor maybe. But also just being practical and thinking about writing things down for, you know, if deaf children aren't understanding things. It may be that if your child is really struggling in class, if the teacher's wearing a face mask in class all the time, maybe your child's never needed a radio aid before, maybe they've got a mild, moderate hearing loss, and before they've managed okay, but now that they can't see the teacher's face, maybe they need to think about seeing if they could get access to a radio aid, which would amplify the sound of the teacher into the hearing aids or the cochlear implants. Maybe that will be more useful. And also just to remember to block out as much background noise as possible. So if you're in a class, you know, or if you're at home, just blocking out, closing the windows, turning off a fan, you know, just make the background noise as quiet as possible so that you can concentrate on listening. But yeah, remove the mask if you're able to, but it is a really difficult one. We keep campaigning, and there's NDCS has got quite a big campaign going at the moment around clear masks and advising clear masks in schools. Unfortunately, that's not come out in the latest government guidance, but we're still campaigning for that. So watch this space.
Yeah, it's important, isn't it? If we are aware that we've got children with hearing loss within our class, not just the class but the school as well, but everybody is aware of how we're communicating. Interestingly, you know, online sometimes you can pin the speaker, can't you, so they can see the teacher. And I know some teachers are using headphones which actually cut out some of the bad, you know, like the ones that have the microphone built in.
Oh yes, yeah.
Background noise as well, because the microphone picks up your voice a lot better. So there's things like that I've come across as well. Fantastic. Do you know, it's really illuminating and helpful. So if people want more support, I know you're a mine of information. That, you know, sometimes we need to investigate further, sometimes we need to find out about the particular condition the child has. Are there a range of common hearing impairments that we might come across in schools?
I think in primary school, the most common will be glue ear for younger children, obviously, and that can often lead to a mild to moderate hearing loss. Sometimes that will be corrected with grommets, and sometimes they will, audiology will issue hearing aids instead of or after so many attempts of repairing grommets. But yeah, that's usually sort of in the key stage 1 side of primary school. By the time you get to key stage 2 and above, children who have glue ear have tended to have grown out of that, usually by about the age of 8. That's not always the case, but in the main. Otherwise, it'll usually be hearing loss is picked up now very, very well during the newborn hearing screening testing. So usually it will, you'll know about it.
Right, good. And obviously the support that comes around that. I was also thinking that, you know, could you share as well on your list places where teachers can go and learn about BSL with their class? I just think what a nice thing to learn together, isn't it? Some sign language, whether you need it in your class or not, it's another communication aid, isn't it, for all of us in life? And
absolutely,
some ways that we can all learn to communicate with people who might not be able to hear us. It's a project a class could do. So, you know, if you've got any good websites or places where they can do online learning about BSL, certainly if they have got a child who uses it in their class,
absolutely,
the communication between peers must be really important, mustn't it, to build up that on. So it's a way of doing
absolutely.
That. So where would we go for resources?
So yeah, I mean, obviously we're going to put some links to some resources after this, but I would say the best place to go to is the National Deaf Children's Society. I would say that because I work with them, but we are the leading charity working with deaf children in the UK. So yeah, so log on to our website, www.ndcs.org.uk for the National Deaf Children's Society. We've got loads of resources on there. We are a membership organisation, but just sign up if you're not a member already. Just please do sign up. You can sign up as a parent or a professional, and you get loads of information. There's loads of information for parents or professionals, and it's all targeted depending on the age of your child and the level of deafness of your child. We do loads of events throughout the year. We're putting on lots of online sessions for parents and professionals. At the moment, normally we would go out and do lots of training. At the moment, that's all obviously online. But we've got loads of things. So for parents, we've got everything from like signed stories to coffee mornings for parents that in fact just found out they've got a child with a hearing loss. We're doing things around what to expect at an audiology appointment since COVID has happened, things around mental health, self-esteem, loads of things. I should have written them all down, but there's loads of resources online, loads of events that we're doing, lots of publications, the blogs. We've got some really good specialists, our education specialists and our legal team. They're doing some brilliant blogs that's keeping us all up to date with what's going on in government and amendments and things like the Clear Face Mask campaign and how that's going. Yeah, just keep looking at the information that's constantly being updated on the website. And we've also got loads of fact sheets and things to download as well. So, and if in doubt, to do with anything, to trying to find information, if you can't find it on the website, just phone our helpline. And we've got a lovely team that work on the helpline, and they're there every day from 9 till 5, ready and willing to take your calls. We also do live chat, so if you want to just send a message through live chat, and we can also take BSL calls for deaf people to phone up through Interpreter Now. So if you need to use BSL to contact us, you can go through Interpreter Now. And that'll come through to us and we'll get the information out to you.
Brilliant. I shall be bookmarking that and having a good look around it as well. Thank you so much, Gemma. It's been really illuminating to talk to you. I've learned so much, and I know that people listening to this presentation will. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
Hey, it's Ian here at Studio TV. Thank you so much for joining us here at Getting It Right for Me Live. Let me ask you a really quick question. Are you here because you are hoping to develop your skills and your knowledge and all your learning and understanding around supporting and caring for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities? I assume that's what you've come here for. We hope that you're enjoying your time here with us. There's some amazing people, and we're so grateful for them coming and being part of this. And we're so grateful for you to be joining us as well. There's a couple of things I just really quickly wanted to introduce you to. First of all, don't forget that you can upgrade your ticket at any time to one of the paid tickets, which we try to keep the price as low as we possibly can, just to cover what we need to help out the speakers a little bit and make sure this event is as good as it can be. What that means is you can access the live Q&A sessions that we're running throughout the event, and you can access all the sessions for up to a year afterwards if you buy one of those paid tickets. Check out the whole school ones. How that works is if you book a whole school ticket, and you can pay online, or you can drop us a line and we'll issue an invoice and we'll sort it all out. That's absolutely fine. But we'll then make it possible for all your staff to be able to access all the sessions here at Getting It Right for Me Live this year. So do hope that's helpful. The other thing I want to mention is, and there are lots of members joining us this week, so thank you so much to those of you who are members, but we have put together, if you're looking to go deeper and access ongoing support and help and training, either as an individual, as a parent, as a professional supporting someone with additional needs, in a school or educational setting, or from a professional point of view, we have put together here at Studio TV with Lynn McCann and her team at Reach Out ASC a fantastic membership that starts at just £10 a month and includes a wide range of courses to help you support those in your care. There's a load of resources and tools, printable things that you can use to work with those children, support them. And there's more content being added all the time. One of my favorite parts of the membership is there is a peer group community that's built into that. So you can ask questions of Lynn and her team and your peers, built right into that membership as well. As I say, it starts at just £10 a month. Whole school memberships are there. We're offering trust-wide memberships, and local authorities have started to get in touch and offer this to their staff across a range of schools as well. We would love for you to join our community. If you've got any questions on that, drop us a line, but very much hope to see you there. And thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the day.